I was on my way home from work when it happened. It had been a long, exhausting day, and I was just counting the minutes until I could collapse into bed. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the sound of screeching tires. Too fast, too close. Then the impact. When I woke up, everything hurt. My ribs felt like they were on fire. My leg was heavy and numb. And there was this sharp, suffocating pain in my chest every time I tried to breathe. The room was too bright, the beeping of machines too loud. It took me a few seconds to realize where I was. A hospital. I blinked up at the ceiling, trying to remember what had happened. Then it hit me. An accident. My car. Someone had hit me. A nurse noticed I was awake and started explaining things in a calm, practiced voice. I had been in a bad crash. A truck had run a red light and slammed into me, flipping my car. The paramedics had said it was a miracle I made it out alive. Emergency surgery, fractured ribs, internal bleeding, a broken leg. A lot of words that didn't really sink in. All I could think about was my parents. They must have been called. They had to be worried sick. Any minute now, they'd come rushing in, but they didn't. I waited. An hour, then two. The first night passed in a blur of pain meds and exhaustion, and still, nothing. No calls, no texts. The second day, I asked a nurse if my parents had been informed. She checked my chart, nodded. They were called the night you were admitted, she said, glancing at me with a hint of pity. I forced a smile, pretending it didn't sting. Maybe they couldn't get here yet. The nurse hesitated. They answered the call. I felt my stomach drop. And she gave me this look like she didn't want to be the one to say it. They didn't seem too concerned. I laughed, because what else was I supposed to do? Maybe she got it wrong. Maybe they misunderstood how serious it was. I still had my phone. Somehow, it had survived the crash. I sent my mom a message. Hey, I'm in the hospital. Bad accident, but I'm okay. Can you call me? No response. I sent another one a few hours later. Then another. And another. Nothing. By the third day, I wasn't even sure what I was hoping for anymore. Maybe some small part of me still thought they'd show up, that they'd push open the hospital door and prove me wrong. But the days kept passing, and I kept waiting, and they never came. On the fourth day, my phone buzzed. My heart jumped, and I scrambled to grab it. It was my mom. Heard you were in an accident. Hope you're okay. That was it. No, how are you? No, do you need anything? Just a casual, detached text like she was responding to some random piece of gossip. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. My chest felt tight, and not just from the broken ribs. I wanted to scream, to throw my phone across the room. Instead, I just stared at the words until they blurred. I didn't even reply. What was the point? By the sixth day, I had given up. My friends, who lived out of state, had called some local relatives to check on me, so at least I wasn't completely alone. A family friend, Lisa, dropped by that evening with some flowers and snacks, chatting away like she was trying to fill the awkward silence. Then, in the middle of talking about her new job, she casually mentioned something that made my stomach turn. It's so amazing that your brother got that award. Your parents must be so proud. I blinked. What award? Lisa frowned. The business thing? That big ceremony last weekend? I just assumed you knew. I didn't know. I felt my throat close up. They went to an award ceremony? Lisa nodded. Yeah, it was a huge deal. Black tie, cameras everywhere. Your mom looked so elegant in the pictures. She stopped mid-sentence, her smile faltering. Wait, they didn't tell you? I forced a breath. No, they didn't. She looked uncomfortable, like she had just realized she had stepped into something she wasn't supposed to. I thought you knew. I'm sorry. I shook my head, smiling tightly. It's fine. Thanks for letting me know. She left soon after, but I just sat there, staring at the wall. They knew. They had known I was in the hospital, and instead of coming to see me, instead of even texting me, they went to Ryan's ceremony. I thought back to that single, empty text from my mom. Hope you're okay, that's all I was worth. A half-second of effort, typed out between champagne toasts and applause for their golden child. I don't even know how long I sat there before I picked up my phone again. My fingers were ice cold, but I typed out the message anyway. You knew I was in the hospital. You knew I almost died. And you still chose to go to Ryan's event. Do you even care? This time, I didn't have to wait days for a response. The reply came within minutes. And it made everything worse. My mom's response came fast. Too fast. Like she had been waiting for me to say something. Ryan's award was important. He worked so hard for it. We couldn't miss it. I read it twice, trying to wrap my head around it. That was her excuse? That was supposed to make this okay? I typed back, my hands shaking. I was in the hospital. I could have died. Her reply came just as fast. And you didn't. You're fine. The doctors were taking care of you. What did you want us to do? Sit around and watch you sleep? I felt something inside me snap. I had spent years convincing myself that maybe I was overreacting, that maybe I was too sensitive. But now, I had it in writing. Proof. They didn't care. I didn't reply. I couldn't. My hands were too tight around my phone. My ribs ached from how hard I was breathing. A few minutes later, another message popped up. This one from my dad. This isn't a competition, you know? You can't expect us to drop everything every time something happens to you. Every time? Like this was some kind of pattern? Like I was constantly demanding their attention? I had been in a life-threatening accident. And instead of even pretending to care, they were making it sound like I was being dramatic. I tossed my phone onto the hospital tray, staring at the ceiling. I don't know what I expected. An apology? Concern? That was stupid. I should have known better. A week passed. I was finally discharged, still sore, still weak, but more than ready to go home and pretend none of this had happened. I was halfway to my apartment door when I saw them. My parents. Waiting. I stopped so fast that pain shot through my ribs, but I barely noticed. My mom's face lit up like she hadn't just ignored me for a week. Sweetheart, you look so much better. My dad gave me a nod, like we were business acquaintances. Let's go inside. We need to talk. I didn't move. Why are you here? Mom sighed like I was being difficult. Come on, honey. We just want to see you. I stared at them. The fake smiles. The careful, rehearsed concern. The flowers in my mom's hand, as if some last-minute grocery store bouquet was supposed to erase everything. You didn't want to see me before. My voice came out cold, detached. Why now? My dad exhaled through his nose, already annoyed. Are we really going to do this? You're our daughter. We wanted to check on you. I didn't buy it. Not for a second. Then say what you really came here for. They exchanged a look, and my mom's fake warmth dropped. It's about Ryan. Of course it was. My mom's voice wavered, like she was already gearing up to cry. He's in trouble. I should have felt something. Panic. Maybe. Concern. But all I felt was exhaustion. What kind of trouble? Dad ran a hand over his face like this whole thing was an inconvenience to him. He's been arrested. I blinked. For a second, I thought I misheard. What? Mom sniffled. It's all a big misunderstanding, but... For what? I cut her off. Neither of them wanted to say it. Finally, Dad sighed. Fraud. Embezzlement. I let that sink in. My brother, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, had been arrested for stealing money from his company. It almost would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. Mom grabbed my hand, her fingers cold. Sweetheart, we need your help. I yanked my hand back. There it is. Her eyes widened. What? I gestured between them. You didn't come here for me. You came because you need something. Dad's jaw tightened. We've already spent everything we have on lawyers, but we don't have enough for his bail. We know you've been saving money and... I laughed. Actually laughed. It sounded a little unhinged, even to me. Are you serious? Mom's voice broke. Honey, please. We're his family. I shook my head, still laughing. Family? The word tasted bitter in my mouth. That's rich, coming from you. Dad's patience snapped. Oh, stop acting like a victim. You have the money. You just don't want to help. My chest ached, but not from my injuries. From how predictable this all was. I took a deep breath. No. Mom blinked. What? No, I said again, louder this time. I'm not giving you a cent. Her face crumpled like I had physically hurt her. Sweetheart, don't do this. I stepped past them, unlocking my door. You already did. I pushed inside and slammed the door in their faces. I barely made it to my couch before my legs gave out. My whole body ached, my ribs screaming in protest, but I didn't care. I just sat there, staring at the door, waiting. For what? For them to knock? To beg? To scream? But they didn't. I heard them talking in low, urgent voices outside. My mom let out a choked sob. My dad muttered something too quiet to catch, and then silence. A few seconds later, footsteps. The elevator dinged, and they were gone. I exhaled, pressing my palms into my face. I should have felt relieved, proud, even. For the first time in my life, I had stood my ground. I had told them no. So why did I feel like I couldn't breathe? My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I already knew who it was before I looked. Mom, you're making a huge mistake. Dad, you're going to regret this. I turned off my phone and threw it across the couch. For the next few days, the silence stretched. No calls, no texts. I almost let myself believe that was the end of it, that they had finally accepted I wasn't going to save Ryan. I should have known better. It started small. A call from my aunt, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. At first, she acted concerned, asking how I was doing after the accident. But it didn't take long before she got to the real reason she was calling. I heard about Ryan, she said. Your parents told me everything. I already knew what was coming. They're devastated, she continued. They said you won't even talk to them. Honey, I get that you're upset, but this is your family. I let out a slow breath, gripping the phone tighter. Did they tell you they ignored me in the hospital? That they only showed up when they needed money? A pause. They're under a lot of stress, she said finally. You know how much pressure they're under. Ryan's their son. I almost laughed. So am I. The call ended quickly after that, but it didn't stop there. More relatives started reaching out. Some were subtle, carefully worded messages about forgiveness and family unity. Others were straight-up accusations. How can you turn your back on your own brother? You know how much your parents have done for you, right? You're being cruel. I blocked every number. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I got an email. From Ryan. At first, I just stared at it. My finger hovered over the delete button, but something in me hesitated. I opened it. It was long, messy, full of rambling justifications. He started by saying he understood why I was mad, that he knew our parents had always treated him differently. He even admitted they had neglected me, that they had never given me the same love and attention. It was the first time I had ever heard him acknowledge it. But then, of course, came the excuses. He swore he hadn't meant to get involved in anything illegal, that he was just doing what his bosses told him to do, that the higher-ups were the real criminals, and he was just being used as a scapegoat. Then, the kicker. I know you're angry at Mom and Dad, but this isn't about them. This is about us. You're my sister. You're the only one who can help me. I read that line over and over. It was never about making things right. It was about keeping the family together, keeping my parents' perfect image intact. I closed my laptop. I didn't reply, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. What if he was telling the truth? What if he really was being used? And worse, what if I was making a mistake? I told myself I was done, that I didn't care, that Ryan had made his bed, and now he had to lie in it. But his email stuck with me. Not because of the guilt. No, I was past that. But because of the way he worded things. He didn't just beg me for help. He admitted our parents had treated me like I was less than him. And that was new. Ryan never acknowledged it before. He acted like he didn't notice, or, worse, like it wasn't happening. So why now? I don't know what possessed me to do it, but I started digging. Maybe I just wanted to prove to myself that I was right to ignore him. Maybe some small, stubborn part of me needed to know for sure. I reached out to a lawyer friend of mine, not for legal advice, just to ask where I could find information. They pointed me in the right direction, and I spent the next few days reading everything I could about the case. News articles, financial reports, court filings, anything that was public. And that's when I realized something. Ryan wasn't lying. Not completely. The fraud at his company had been going on for years, long before he started working there. The higher-ups had been moving money, covering their tracks with fake transactions, and when it all started unraveling, they needed someone to take the fall. Ryan had been stupid, greedy, but he wasn't the mastermind. He was just the easiest one to blame. I didn't know how to feel about it. On one hand, it was hard not to pity him. He had spent his entire life being told he was special, untouchable. Our parents had protected him from every mistake, every consequence. He had never learned how to take responsibility because he had never needed to. And now, for the first time in his life, he was dealing with something they couldn't fix. But on the other hand, he still did it. He wasn't some innocent victim who got caught in the crossfire. He stole money. He forged documents. He made the choice to go along with it because he thought he'd get away with it. Now he wanted me to clean up the mess. Just like always. I sat with that for a while. Then, finally, I responded to his email. I looked into your case. I know you weren't the one in charge, but you still did it. And now you want me to fix it, just like Mom and Dad always have. I'm not them. I'm not going to save you. I hit send. His reply came an hour later. I hope you can live with yourself. That was the last thing he ever said to me. I expected my parents to come after me again, to call, to text, to show up at my door demanding that I do the right thing. But after Ryan's last email, everything went quiet. Too quiet. For a while, I thought maybe they had finally given up. Maybe they had accepted that I wasn't going to save him. Then my cousin Emily called. Hey, she said carefully, like she was stepping over broken glass. I wanted to check in. Have you seen what your parents are saying about you? My stomach twisted. What do you mean? She hesitated. They've been talking to the family, saying things. I closed my eyes. Just tell me. She sighed. They're telling everyone that you refuse to help Ryan because you're holding a grudge, that you're jealous of him, and you're using this as an excuse to punish them. They're making it sound like you have plenty of money, but you're just spiteful. Of course they were. I let out a slow breath. And do people believe them? Emily was quiet for a second. Some do. But honestly, a lot of people don't. That surprised me. She lowered her voice. Look, your parents have spent years making Ryan out to be some perfect golden boy. But people aren't stupid. They've seen the way they treat you. And this whole thing? It's making them look bad, not you. I frowned. What do you mean? Emily hesitated again, then said, You're not the only one they've done this to. That made me sit up straighter. What? And then the stories started coming. An uncle who had once loaned Ryan money for a failed business venture and was cut off when he tried to get it back. An aunt who had been pushed out of the family for calling out Ryan's behavior at a wedding. A cousin who had been blamed for something Ryan did just to protect him. One after another, people started reaching out to me. Some of them to offer support, others just to vent about all the things they had never been able to say. I had spent years thinking it was just me, that I was the problem, that I wasn't good enough. But it had never been about me. It had always been about Ryan. And now, my parents were losing control of the narrative. My parents must have realized the tide was turning against them because, after weeks of silence, they tried one last time. My mom called first. I let it go to voicemail. Then my dad. Same thing. A minute later, a text, we need to talk. It's urgent. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. What is it? I typed back. The response came fast. Ryan took a deal. I froze. I pulled up the news. Sure enough, there it was. Ryan had flipped. He had given the authorities everything. Names, evidence, details of the fraud scheme. In exchange, he got a reduced sentence. A year behind bars, then community service. He had turned on the very people he claimed had framed him. I shouldn't have been surprised. Ryan had never faced real consequences in his life. Of course, he'd do whatever it took to save himself. I stared at my phone, waiting for the inevitable follow-up text from my parents. It came seconds later. We need your help. Please. I almost laughed. Even now, with everything falling apart, they still thought I would save them. No. No explanation. No second chances. Just one final, definitive answer. This time, they didn't reply. And just like that, they were out of my life. For the first time, I felt free. No more chasing their approval. No more being the backup plan. No more begging for love they were never willing to give. I blocked their numbers. Told the front desk at my building not to let them in. That was it. Was it sad? Maybe, but it wasn't a loss. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't an afterthought. I was my own person, and that was worth more than anything they could have ever given me.